Hey, what's up, world? This is Agent Seth Banks coming with a video to give 10 tips for all first-time homebuyers. So feel free to stick around, hear everything I got to say. The tips is going to go pretty fast, so if you want more information at the end, feel free to DM, feel free to comment under the post, feel free to go on my website and reach out to me there, and I'll answer any other questions. So tip number one is going to be credit. Credit is definitely number one because obviously if you don't have any credit established, no mortgage lender or bank is going to give you a pre-qualification letter. The higher your credit is, the better you can possibly get a rate and have like better down payment situations and stuff like that. So if you need help working on that credit, obviously I partner with various lenders who can help you get to the point of getting qualified. I also know a few people who do credit repair if you don't want to necessarily go that route. I personally think speaking to a lender is the best way because they'll be the ones looking at everything from top down to give you a pre-qualification letter. So why not just, reach out to them, and see what you need to do to get that letter. Okay, so tip number two is getting your pre-qualification letter, right? So like I just stated, a mortgage lender or a bank will be the ones giving you the letter after they look at your credit and how much money you make and all that. But you're not actually able to buy the house yet until you have the pre-qualification letter. So until you speak to a mortgage lender or a bank and they look at how much money you make, they look at your credit, they look at your job, whether it's a contract, whether you're self-employed, whether you have an employee job, and then they'll come up with a certain purchase price for you, and that'll give you a general understanding of how much of a house you can afford and what you should typically look for. And the last thing I want to say about the pre-qualification letter is you don't want to really start looking at houses before you get that letter, because for one, you can be looking at houses that are out of your range, right? So let's say, for example, you're thinking, okay, I only want to spend $800 a month as a mortgage, right? And you're looking at houses that's $300,000, $400,000. Unless you're paying a stupid amount for a down payment, your monthly mortgage is going to be obviously higher than that. So if you're just looking at homes, you're not wasting only your time, but you're wasting the realtor you hired's time as well. So definitely get that pre-qualification letter in, or at least have a better general understanding of how much of a purchase price you want before you're looking at homes, so nobody's wasting time. Tip number three is going to be having cash on hand. I say having cash on hand because once you actually present an offer and you have an executed contract saying that, hey, this is the offer I want to make to the seller, and the seller signs and agrees accepting it, then that's called an executed contract. And once that happens, you have to pay something called due diligence or earnest money, depending on if you want to offer both or not, which really just depends on what area you're dealing with in real estate. But definitely have cash on hand, because during the whole process, you're going to have things you're going to have to pay for, such as, like I said, the earnest money, the due diligence. If you get a home inspection, which I will always recommend getting a home inspection done, because you don't want to buy a house and you find out problems later down the road. At least when you have the home inspection done, like, you're going to hire a professional to come out, look from the roof all the way down to the crawl space, look for holes in the wall, check pipes and all that, and literally gives you like the best understanding of what type of house you're buying. So definitely have cash on the side for that, for all the stuff I just named. I'll say it again: the due diligence, the earnest money, the home inspection. Depending on who you get your pre-qualification letter with, you might also have to get an appraiser to come out to appraise the property and check on some things as well. And if anything comes back from the home inspection reports, like for example, let's say he checks out the crawl space and he notices that there was potential termite damage. Well, if you decided to get a termite inspection, then that's something else you would have to pay for, because the buyer has the responsibility to like find out everything what's wrong with the house. The seller doesn't necessarily have to say anything, because the seller can just sell their house as is if they want to and not let you know everything about the house. So tip number four is going to be sticking to your budget. I say sticking to your budget because, like I said in the previous tip, that you have different things that you're going to be paying for throughout the the home buying process. once you get under contract. And if you offer too much on a house and your down payment is going to be more than what you really want it to be, and then you still got to cover your monthly mortgage, and then you still got to pay for the inspections and everything, if you don't like accurately, you know, set a strict budget, especially, you know, overpricing the budget, because you never know what's going to happen. You always want to overprice stuff, so just in case something else comes up, you can afford it. But if you don't stick to that budget, it's definitely going to come back and bite you in the long run. So that's a very important tip I want to give as well. Not really too much to say on that one, but definitely make sure you stick to your budget, because you don't want to end up paying for more than what you expected to when you start the process. So whatever you planned out in the beginning, just stick with that plan all the way until you execute it at the end. Okay, boom. So tip number 5 is going to be researching what it takes to be a property owner. Before you just go in buying a house, like before you do anything, I don't care whether it's real estate or not, you need to make sure you do research on that, because you don't want to jump into something and not know like all the outcomes, and you know, pretty much just put you in a situation where you don't want to be in. So make sure you do research, because when you're a homeowner, you have property taxes, and some cases you can get that tied into your mortgage, some cases you don't. But some properties like townhomes and condos, and even some single family houses, depending on the area, especially in North Carolina, I haven't seen a townhome or a condo yet that does not have an HOA fee. But some properties also have HOA fees, so you want to make sure you're looking into that, knowing what HOA fees are, knowing what they cover for you, knowing what they do for you. So especially when you're buying a house, because every HOA is going to be different. So just make sure, you know, you're doing your research, because you don't want nothing to bite you in the butt, you know, longer down the road. So, because you still, just like if you had an apartment, you still have to pay for like water bills. You still got to pay for Duke Energy or whatever the energy provider is in your area. So just make sure you just do your research. That's all I'm trying to say. Okay, tip number 6. Something I should have mentioned earlier, but it's okay. We're gonna mention it right now. Tip number 6 is studying your different type of financing options, right? So like I said earlier in the video, you know, getting a pre-qualification letter, there's different types of pre-qualification letters you can have, and there's different type of programs you can go through to acquire a property. What most people always hear is, you know, get a letter, pay 20% down on a house, and then boom, that's yours. Yes, there are loan programs that you pay 20% for, but just because you hear that all the time doesn't necessarily mean that that's what you have to pay for. I know I work with lenders who have done 3%, 3.5%, but those are FHA loans as well. So just to get to that part of it, you have FHA loans, you have conventional loans, you have VA loans, you have, I know in our area we have USDA loans, which is basically for like rural areas, and then obviously you have cash is king. So pretty much, you know, the easiest process is paying for cash with the property. But yeah, like I was saying, FHA loans are for first-time home buyers, people who haven't owned a property before or just know anything about the home buying process in general. That's what's pretty much most common for a first-time home buyer. Now, granted, you do have some people who will still get the conventional loan when they're buying a house for the first time, but conventional loans are normally what you see the 20% down payment being. But I personally have lenders and people I know who can do a conventional loan as low as 3% as this moment of time, because when you're seeing this, who knows what regulations and stuff might be. But I do have a lender, one of the lenders I work with, who will do a 3% conventional loan for a first-time home buyer if you don't want to go through the FHA route. And the only reason why somebody wouldn't want to go through that FHA route is because they have a lot of requirements that they will check throughout the home buying process, because FHA loans are going to require an appraiser to come out. So somebody's going to have to come out, get the value of the property, make sure everything's up to code and stuff like that. When you're doing a conventional loan, all that isn't necessarily required. You can pretty much just buy the house however it is. Like even with the FHA loan, like they won't let you buy a house that might have holes everywhere, roof falling down, like none of that. Like they want a move-in ready home for FHA loans, which makes the most sense, because you wouldn't want to give a loan to somebody who never owned a house before and let them buy a house that's not moving ready and not necessarily understand and know what things they need to do to keep the house like afloat. But outside of those two loans, you also have VA loans, which are for veterans. Those loans can cover, well, those loans do cover the down payment for veterans. Obviously, I am not a mortgage lender, so take everything I'm saying right now to like a certain pedestal. Like, granted, yes, I work with different people who works for all these loans, but they're the ones that qualify people. So I just know the general information in the different routes, because if I see a loan, then I just pretty much know how the process is going to be, because a VA loan is sometimes similar to FHA, where they have certain requirements since they're giving you a down payment. So like, you're not the ones paying it out of pocket, so it's a little bit more of a risk factor for them. But outside of those three, the other one I mentioned is USDA loans, which is for like rural areas. Those can also cover your down payment. So all these loans that I'm basically mentioning, like, you can do more research on it on your own, of course. So FHA loans, VA loans, conventional loans, USDA loans, pretty much, you know, feel free to reach out to me and I can get you in contact with people if you're in the area of North Carolina looking to get one of these loans to purchase a property. But definitely make sure you're doing your research on a different type of loans and see which one best works out for you. I always recommend a FHA loan for any first-time home buyer, just because it's the easiest loan. You don't have to put as much money down. Yes, your interest might accrue a little bit more over the years compared to a conventional loan, but at least you're getting your feet wet. And if you decide to sell the house, if it gains some equity over the years, you can get some money back, you know, before you even have to pay all the interest. Tip number 7 is going to be, make sure you have a plan for the property long term. I say this because you don't want to just buy a house and, you know, not have a plan for it. Now, granted, most people are going to buy a house and they're going to want to live in it forever, you know, pass it down generation after generation after generation. But then there's other people who want to, you know, start their own real estate portfolio. They might want to have some Airbnbs. They might want to have some rental properties. They might want to start doing some fix and flips. But basically, you know, just make sure you have a plan, and a few backup plans, because if you buy a house and you want to rent it out, but maybe no renters are really like looking to rent in that area or something like that, maybe you can turn it to an Airbnb. Maybe you can get a property management company to help you rent it out, or just anything of that nature. But just make sure you got a plan long term. Like, don't just, you know, be like, I want to buy a house, and then you buy a house and then you're living in it for a year and you're like, well, I want to sell it. But in some situations you might have an FHA loan where it's like you can't sell your property for the first few years, you know. So make sure you have your plan in place where, you know, if you buy a house somewhere, like, you'll be fine living there for however X many amount of years that your loan might require, which I haven't personally seen anything more than 5. And I've only seen a 5%, I've only seen a 5-year like recommendation for first-time home buyer programs. So if somebody's doing like down payment assistance and they're pretty much buying a house with like no money coming out their pocket, those are the ones I'll see where it's like, okay, make sure you live in the house for at least 5 years and give the bank some of their money back before, you know, you attempt to sell it. But yeah, that's it with that tip. So on to the next. Okay, tip number 8 is going to be to make sure you have a competitive mindset. I say have a competitive mindset because right now in the market I'm working in, at least, and the other markets I've seen other EXP realtors in different areas work, the market is super competitive right now. Pretty much every house that's moving ready that a lot of people are, you know, requesting to see has multiple offers and saying bring your highest and best offer by X day at X time. So if you don't have that competitive mindset to, you know, really make sure you're looking at houses every day, from if you have a good realtor, hopefully they're sending you houses automatically, cause I know I do for all my clients. But make sure you're looking at the emails or however they're sending it to you daily to look at the new houses. Make sure you go see it as soon as you can. Make sure you have, you know, cash on hand, like I said earlier, for your due diligence and your earnest money, because the better your due diligence is, like the higher you give in due diligence, the better your chances of winning an offer. And I didn't touch much on what due diligence or earnest money is, but Just to sum it up real quick, due diligence and earnest money is basically both upfront payments that you pay to the seller and the attorney. The due diligence goes directly to the seller. So if you have like a higher check for the seller saying, hey, this is my contract, this is what we want to offer, this is how serious I'm looking to buy it, with however much money that is, like the higher, the better your chances of winning, basically. Now don't get me wrong, I know people who've won multiple offer situations with lower end due diligence or earnest money, but sometimes they're just offering way more on the house. So you really just gotta weigh out all your options on if you're fine with giving up more earnest money and due diligence up front, which is a little bit risky, or if you're fine with just upping your purchase price amount by maybe 5 or 10,000 or 15 or however your budget is. But yeah, like I was saying though, like when you're being competitive, you know, you have a pretty earnest money and due diligence amount. You're the first one to go see it. You're the first person to talk to the agent and let them know you have an offer on hand. Those are gonna increase your chances better when winning, unless you get in the highest and best situation. But sometimes if you're the first person with a pretty offer, like the sellers will just go ahead and accept it because they don't even want to see everything else, because they're like, okay, well, they're offering more than what I want, they're giving a good amount of earnest money due diligence, I don't have to look at any other houses. And if you're a current buyer in this market watching this video and you've seen houses go into contract the same day, 9 times out of 10 that's probably what happened. Somebody looked at that house that day and presented an offer that day and offered more money than they were asking for, probably more earnest money and due diligence than what they were expecting to get, and the offer was just too good to be true to sit here and wait for people to look at the house a week later and wonder if, you know, they want to even put up an offer, you know. So being on it first definitely helps. I mean, being first at anything always helps. So yeah, that's it with competitive mindsets. So tip number 9, I cannot stress this tip enough, is knowing what closing cost is. I said the first tip, whatever, it was the first 2 tips, I can't remember as I've been going along, but wherever I said, you know, make sure you have a good budget, closing costs is definitely important for that as well, because depending on what type of pre-qualification letter you have, they might cover your closing costs, they might cover partial of it, but you can have the seller, you know, pay for closing costs. But closing costs is really like the buyer's responsibility. So yes, you can have the sellers pay for it. Yes, I've had situations where I've had sellers pay for my buyer's closing costs, but out of all those situations, all of them offered at least what they were asking for, like in the purchase price when they asked for closing costs, or they had a loan that actually covered $2,000 of it, or they covered the full amount, or they would cover 3% of the purchase price, you know, whatever, you know, your pre-qualification letter might be. But yeah, that's pretty much it with the closing costs. Like I said, closing costs is what you typically pay the attorney for basically all the work of being under contract, because you have to pay for title fees and, you know, transfers of tax stuff and all that other good stuff. Yeah, that's pretty much it with tip number 9. So making sure you know you have a good plan as well for what you're going to do with the closing costs, whether you're going to offer more and have the sellers cover it, whether you're going to offer what they're asking and see if they're going to be willing to do it. But if you're in a multiple offer situation, just make sure you talk to a really good realtor about, you know, what a pretty offer would be, because when you're asking for closing costs and you're only giving what they're asking and you're not giving a lot of earnest money and due diligence, they're just gonna look at your contract and go right to the next. So yeah, that's it with the closing costs. I didn't want to make that tip too long because it doesn't have to be that long. So yeah, that's it with that. Okay, so my last and final tip number 10 is going to be hire a good realtor, right? For anybody that's ever worked with me, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I would say I'm a pretty good realtor. I always have good intentions for all my clients. I tell every single one of my clients that they can hit me up at any time of the day. I've had clients who work weird shifts, so they might hit me up at 10 o'clock. I remember back before pre-COVID, I had one guy who would text me sometimes at like 2 in the morning on like a Saturday sending me houses, and I would be out. If I was out having drinks with friends, I would text him back like, yep, I'm on the MLS seeing that this is that and that is this, or answering whatever question they have. So just make sure whoever you're hiring, like, they have good intentions, they're responsive, they don't come with like, you know, a lot of excuses. You know, make sure they're really working for you. So if you are in the North Carolina area and you're looking for a realtor who, you know, you need somebody to represent you for, if you ever had questions about starting in this area or just any questions in general, I would love to, you know, answer any questions somebody has. I really enjoy spreading this knowledge, which is the whole point of me, you know, starting to make videos. Only because, like, I know every day I'm in this market, I'm growing, I'm learning more, and I want to make it easier for the, not necessarily just the next generation, but the people that's in my generation as well. So I know home ownership can definitely help with, you know, your funds for the long term. There's a lot of people who made a lot of money off of real estate. So that's it with this video. Appreciate anybody that's watching. Feel free to DM, feel free to comment, feel free to go to my website and reach out to me. I'll put my social media handles attached to this video. So that's it for this, and thanks for watching.